So for those who don't know me, I think everybody here knows me. I'm Jim Polyzoidis, Director of Anasa Wellness. And today I'll be talking about studies and evidence supporting the effectiveness of natural therapies. So that's a very large topic. And what I want to do is limit it to things that are relevant to us and keep it semi-sciencey. So there's a bit of science involved, but I'm going to try to keep it as little as possible. And because it's a large field, I prepared a paper, which you're all welcome to. I can email to people who don't have it, but there'd be more detail in the paper. So we know natural therapies work, so why do we need evidence? I mean, we know it works because a lot of people are doing yoga, cardio, weight training, nutrition regimes. But why do we need it? I mean, the Western world, science and medical professions need evidence. They're fixated on evidence, and for good reasons some of the times, or a lot of the times. But it's not the be-all and end-all, as we know, and that's why we are a member of this community. We want to keep things less mystic than what they are, but sometimes faith is the answer, but not when it comes to medical systems and scientific proofs. So what we need to do, in my opinion, is to gather and create as much evidence as possible to support natural therapies, to get them accepted into the mainstream more than they are, because they are being accepted a lot. As time goes on, there's massive bodies of evidence being built up, and I'll go through that. And I've identified a number of studies that we'll go through, which are incredibly interesting to me, but if there's any others that you guys can think of, let me know, and I'll be incorporating this into a much wider, probably a book in due course. So I'll get started. So the first field I want to talk about, natural therapy, is connected with yoga, mindfulness and meditation. And there's probably three major studies that blew me away. The first one was a 2018 study done out of Harvard involving mice. And that one showed, just over a 4-week period, that growth in tumours was actually halved over a 4-week period when these mice were actually subjected to very gentle stretching of 10 minutes a day. Why is that relevant? Stretching, as we know, can be very easy to do. Can be done by everybody. People with cancer can probably stretch a little bit. But this study was amazing because it took 2 groups of mice, and unfortunately they were injected with breast cancer cells and assessed over a 4-week period. And they were, one group was doing a downward facing mouse. They would just be lifted by the tail a little bit for about 10 minutes, and they'd be holding their legs out like that. And the other group would just be left to its own devices. And over a 4-week period, they took data, and it was a clear difference between the tumour size at the end of the stretch group versus the non-stretch group of pretty much half the size. Why? Why did this happen? And it's not hard to imagine that we probably get the same results in humans. Well, they reckon it all has to do with the immune system, so that when you are stretching and relaxing, you're kind of tempering the immune response. Usually when the body is diseased and it's fighting something like a cancer, the immune system is revved up and very tired, it gets fatigued. And so they attribute this response to relaxed immune system and lower inflammation. And sounds right from a Western perspective. I reckon there's probably more to it from an Eastern perspective, like yin stretching the key, but it sounds right. And what they did mention that a lot more study is needed, but we have to take care of reading too much into it, because as we know from our training, it's actually a bit risky when you start massaging and stretching somebody that's already got cancer, because you might actually spread the cancer. So they've left that out. It's still early days, but very powerful study. So they attribute it to the immune system being relaxed and modulated, so you're actually relaxing the body and better able to fight the cancer. So the second study, which is actually even more important for us yogis, is that they found, this is in 2013 in Canada, they did a study involving a group of long-term yoga practitioners from all the different styles of yoga versus a very healthy group of very like individuals, same age groups, fitness levels, but no yoga. And they discovered that one part of the brain in particular had developed very differently in the yogis. And that's the insular cortex, which lies kind of inside the ear. It's not the prefrontal cortex, it's inside, quite deep. And it was incredible to find that there was a linear relationship between the number of years that you practice yoga and the size of the insula, the grey matter and the white matter. So grey matter is volume, white matter is structure. It's how there's integrity in the brain when you've got white matter. So for the yogi group, they found, especially in the insular cortex, especially on the left side, much greater development. So this is the muscle yogis build, right? Apart from all the physical work we do, we actually build the mind physically. And it's just bloody mind-blowing, right? So we build this muscle, and the longer you do yoga, the bigger it gets. And they say, well, what's the point? Why does that matter? Guess what? Yogis, the size of the cortex, the insula, is actually related to your pain tolerance. And they did tests, and yogis were better able to tolerate pain when it comes to cold, double the time of a normal healthy individual. When it came to heat, not as much, but the cold, double the time of tolerance. They also tested on sensitivity. Okay, does that mean we became less sensitive? And therefore, no. Sensitivity of pain was the same. We were better able to deal with it by using all the strategies we know about mindfulness and dissociation, and all the strategies we are trained for every day as yogis, right? So quite incredible. The lessons from that study I take as follows. So I've said that there's a pretty much linear relationship, number of years of practice, to the development of the brain in this manner. So the yoga practice is actually creating the anatomical difference in the brain. But as we know, any body part, or the brain for that matter, develops the more you use it, and it actually disintegrates if you don't use it. So the lesson for me is that, one, the brain is elastic and it can be trained and developed, but if you don't use it in a certain way or many ways, it actually loses its function. So it's very similar to the body. It's very elastic, and that one thing about yoga is that it gets you out of your comfort zone. So I suppose the lesson is, by getting out of your comfort zone and doing things that you're not so comfortable with, it'll do your body and your brain a lot of good. So as I said, all styles of yoga benefited. And the last conclusion I'd say is that because of all this, the yogis are awesome. So The last study related to yoga and mindfulness was very powerful as well. And this is a study out of, I think, the US in 2015, which had a group of ladies that were breast cancer survivors. And they were all very, very stressed. And they'd been given the all clear, but very high cortisol levels. And they were divided into two groups. And one group was given particular focus on mindfulness-based therapy, just getting the stress levels down, a lot of group support. The other group, unfortunately, was given minimal intervention, a bit like the mice, minimal interventions, maybe a couple of videos, for 3 months. And mind-blowing results again, because they looked at the DNA of both groups, and there was a huge difference in the actual DNA of the group that was given the mindfulness. So if we know anything about DNA, is that every time a cell divides and splits, there's 2 strands of chromosomes, and over your life you get a lot of divisions in all the cells. And at the end of each DNA, you've got these little shoelace type little structures called telomeres. And they fray like shoelaces and as you get stressed, they become really battered, and that's associated with a lot of diseases, like limitless amount of disease and inflammation and even very quick aging, because once the DNA is damaged, you get all sorts of problems. So they found in the mindfulness group, the telomeres had maintained their integrity. They looked the same, if not better, but completely disintegrated in the non-mindfulness group, which has huge implications about stress and the way a lot of stress pounds the cell. So huge amount of anti-aging implications there, and how we can help people. So a lot of the magic is just keeping those stress levels down. And that's where, again, mindfulness and yoga. So this was not a yoga-based study. This was a mindfulness-based study. Support, community, and very powerful. I mean, those 3 studies for me, if you hear about them, you think, well, why isn't everybody doing it? It just has to sell everybody into doing these things. And if anybody asks you, well, what's the benefit of yoga? It's all hocus pocus. No, there's real evidence, right? I mean, it's hard evidence, and it's clinical trial based. So it's not. I mean, it shows causation. It's almost 100% bulletproof, right? There's a lot of studies that have to be done. Just to develop this body of knowledge, but irrefutable. So moving on, I'm not going to focus on studies now, just bodies and fields of natural therapies that have benefited from studies. Yoga postures, asana, specific postures and sequences have been shown by many institutions, especially in India. There's actually yoga universities in India, which have proven that yoga, asana, specific asana postures or sequences affect or give benefits to lower back pain, integrity, stress and anxiety, hypertension, insomnia, cardiovascular and heart health, AIDS, depression, arthritis, balance and fall prevention, asthma, diabetes and metabolic disease, just to name a few. So massive body of evidence supporting that. So again, maybe not scientific clinical trials, but we all know from our adventures in the yoga studio that the incredibly powerful benefits it has a tailor-made yoga therapy routine have. And there are a lot of backup for it. But there are studies also which show that there are dangers and risks. So some yoga is contraindicative. It actually is negative for various conditions. Some people with eye conditions, glaucoma, high pressure in the eye, shouldn't be doing inversions, no down dogs, shouldn't be doing headstands, right? That's common sense. People with high blood pressure, same thing. So you've got to ask people before your classes, what are your conditions? Be brutal, open and frank with me, because I can't be giving you the wrong instruction. So, and things like sciatica are obvious, there's limitations, but there can be serious negative consequences in these classes. Moving on from yoga asana to one therapy that I think is hugely powerful is yoga nidra. So yoga nidra, non-sleep deep rest, they call it in the West. It's amazingly powerful. I've used it personally for many, many years. It saved my life once. And it's now backed by a lot of literature and studies. And, you've got US universities, major universities now running clinical trials and just showing exactly what it does. But the Bihar Institute in India, who I think came up with the whole protocol, has written a beautiful book on this. So there's a beautiful book by Satyananda. I don't know if you know about it, but it talks about yoga nidra and its benefits. Very, very powerful. And finally, you can't ignore the benefits of sleep itself, right? So any health regime is useless unless the patient is getting proper sleep. And a lot of problems arise from the lack of or just inadequate sleep. So there's a lot of studies about insomnia, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. I won't get into it. We all know you need your sleep. So that's the field of yoga. How are we going for time, Stephen? Yep. So we've got a few more fields I want to go through, but not in as great a detail. The next one I'll identify as the existence of meridians, or nadis as they call them in the yoga world, and therapies such as acupuncture and shiatsu. So it's quite obvious that we can't really use a scientific piece of equipment to measure prana or ki. You can't do it, right? So you can't actually prove the existence of a meridian. What you can prove by association is a biological connection to an organ using a kind of therapy. So, for example, we know that various acupoints have specific effects on the body. We can prove by association that there is something like a meridian through many thousands of years of anecdotal evidence and practice. We know things work. Just because we don't have 100% causative evidence doesn't mean something doesn't exist. We're just not able to prove it. It's not faith-based completely, but it's practice, we know. And there's been some studies down in the US. There's a guy called Kufu Ma, who's got a lab in the US, and he has dedicated this to figuring out the biological mechanisms of acupuncture. It's a very interesting guy. He's done all this study on different points, and the one on our stomach 37 is a ripper. You've got very low voltage acupuncture at stomach 37, and he's proven you can get rid of systemic inflammation just by doing acupuncture on that point. And the same point was proven in the other study by a fellow called Yan in 2019 to treat irritable bowel syndrome. So I'm just giving one example, 1 point, ST37, which is a stomach point, but it actually regulates, as we know, stomach is a cyclical function, which regulates the bowel. And they found that just by focusing on this 1 point in clinical trial, a type of scientific trial, we get amazing effects on inflammation levels in the body. So maybe not proving existence of meridian, but certainly proving that there is something there that Western science doesn't really understand. So we're, I think, entitled to a little bit of faith-based practice there. It's interesting that acupuncture is actually covered by health insurance and Medicare, and things like shiatsu aren't. And it's only, I think, because guys like this have actually verified the benefits of acupuncture and also the weight of literature over the thousands of years in China that have given it that level of respect. But it's not like you're not going to get dollar for dollar reimbursement the way you would with a drug prescribed by a medical doctor, but nevertheless you get some help. Just quickly, moving on to other potential evidences of meridians. I've discovered that spina bifida, the spinal condition that occurs during pregnancy, usually results in very underdeveloped bladder and kidneys in the individuals that suffer it. So for me, that's a slam dunk. It's all the bladder meridian. You think, okay, well, that's pretty, you can't prove that a deficient bladder meridian caused these. The Western science is that not enough folic acid, therefore spine doesn't develop properly, and therefore the nerves coming out of the spine don't go to the bladder and to the kidney to allow them to function properly. But what about all the other nerves that come out of the spine? Why aren't other organs being affected, like the heart, the lungs? So for me, that's kind of quite obvious evidence of a bladder meridian. So there's a University of California at San Francisco program which looks at that. You can have a look at that. Another potential evidence is, we all know this one, the loss of taste when you get COVID. So for me, that's collapse or very weak spleen, been nurturing metal. Metal's been working really hard to get rid of the pathogen. So spleen comes in and helps, it gets drained, loss of taste. You're never going to hear that in the West. So that's just out there. I mean, I can't see that as being accepted as any evidence of a meridian, but it's just a real world and common symptom that we get, I think, that supports our thinking. And I've worked with some scientists down at Monash in the past, involved in regenerative medicine. They actually take salamanders, and unfortunately they do all sorts of experiments on them. They try to, these things have got amazing capabilities of basically regenerating damaged limbs. They can grow back legs, they can grow back spine, they can grow back brains. And when they grow back brains, they take out almost all the brain, and guess what? They actually retain memories. They can actually grow extra limbs. And it's interesting, one of the professors was telling me, guess what, we can't actually grow limbs back except when it's near a nerve. When we try to put the added leg, I've got pictures, this is not bullshit. They try to put an additional leg on the lower limb, and it doesn't take unless, I believe, it's placed on a meridian. It's bizarre, but he goes, it doesn't work unless you put, I go, I know why that is. He goes, why? I go, it's not the nerve, it's a meridian. Look into it. So it's very fascinating, but I've got some great pictures if you guys want to have a look at that. So a few more fields I'll go through, not much time. The field of resistance training, weight-based and anti-gravity training, which can include yoga, has incredible benefits. We all know there's a lot of literature here. DEXA scans prove high bone density, muscle mass. We need to do some form of resistance training as we get older. Very good for your hormones, bone density. I'm not going to get into it. But one thing I remember Andre was telling us, grip strength is really important as you age. So things like hanging off bars and doing deadlifts, it's all really good for the old folk, but even for young folk. So that's all I'll say about resistance training. Cardiovascular fitness and VO2 max. It's a natural therapy. But everybody does it. We know it works. There's a lot of studies. But it's not just running and aerobics that determine VO2 max. It's also things like keeping your VO2 max is the efficiency at which your body utilizes oxygen. So the better your VO2 max, the less your heart has to work because you need less oxygen to function. And so less heart effort means healthier heart because it's not working as hard, more efficient cardiovascular system. There's a difference between what I'd say extreme fitness versus chilled fitness. Extreme fitness may not necessarily be it's not actually a healthy pursuit. So you can be fit for doing some crazy things, but doesn't necessarily make you healthy because you could be very adrenal, you could be losing bone, just to push yourself to do these amazing ultra marathons. But if you're doing chilled fitness, that normally works. It's good for you. And there's other practices too that actually give you VO2 good levels, and that is detoxing, because oxygen's function mainly, apart from metabolism, is actually to go in and suck out acids, right? We all expire carbon dioxide. Oxygen goes in, latches onto the carbon, and comes out as carbon dioxide. The carbon is actually very acidic, so the less acidic your body is, and it does that for other compounds as well. So the less acidic your body is, the less oxygen you need. So your heart actually works less. So all our detox stuff we used to do, our fasting, just keep the acids out of the body and keep them low in production, and you'll find that you'll need less oxygen. And acids also increase the need for water in the body just to neutralize them, so you got more blood, heart has to work harder. Finally, nutritional and herbal medicine and macrobiotics is covered here, but we've got so much evidence about the goodness of whole foods. Herbal remedies have been used for thousands of years by all cultures. Homeopathic medicine and remedies are widely accepted. So this kind of field there's a lot of literature on it, a lot of good stuff. Macrobiotic diet, though, doesn't necessarily have that much scientific support. It does have anecdotal support. We know it works, we know it has powerful effects, but maybe the one area that there is a lot of evidence is in intake of salt and ratios, for example, of how much salt or sodium you need versus potassium versus magnesium. George Oshawa, the father of macrobiotics, suggested a 1:5 ratio of salt to potassium, yin and yang, or yang and yin. It's kind of, there's agreement in the Western world that you need about 3 to 5 grams of sodium a day, which is roughly 15 grams of salt, because salt is not completely sodium. So if you have about 4 to 5 grams, 3 to maybe 3 teaspoons of salt a day, that's probably what you need, according to Western science. If you're very active, you need more. If you're not that active, if you're hypertensive, you need less. But roughly, that's how much you need, and you need a ratio of 1 to 3 to 1. 1 sodium, 3 potassium, and 1 magnesium parts, according to Western science. So anyway, that's all I've got time for. Bit to cover. Bit covered there. So if anybody knows of any other mind-blowing study, I'd like to know about it. And I'm always open to consults, and hope to see you all. Okay, thank you.